You're listening to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, aimed at helping photographers learn how to make the leap from amateur to pro. Hello and welcome to Mind Your Own Business, a joint effort brought to you by PhotoFocus and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamira Young, and I'm joined by my co-host and fellow photographer, Skip Cohen. Skip, how are you?
Whoa, fellow photographer might be a reach.
You
But
make photos.
I'll take fellow
I'd
photographer.
say
Yes, I
you
do.
qualify.
Yes, I do. Hey, this is great. Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year to you.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is a kick to start out the new year today with one of my favorite artists. We've got Vanessa Joy joining us. And based out of New Jersey, where she lives with her husband and her kids, she is one of the most recognized artists in the industry right now. She is an educator, and she's a friend to so many different people in the industry. On her website, in her About section, there's a sentence I want to share. And it says a lot about the way she positions her love for the business and photography. And it's, quote, "My hope is one day your children and grandchildren discover your wedding album and you pass on the story of your love through it," close quote. She's not just capturing images for an album. It's not a book of pictures. She's creating the first family heirloom of a brand new family. Everybody hear that? There should be little angels up in the corner of your office now, playing the trumpet on that. It's not just a book of photographs. It's a story. So Vanessa, this is going to be the cue for your lips to move. Thanks so much to kicking off 2020 on today's podcast. Welcome to Mind Your Own Business.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun.
This is definitely going to be fun.
Yeah, and your schedule gets crazy. In fact, it's already crazy, and I know you're headed to Imaging USA in Nashville, so that kicks off the year, and it's nonstop. So,
yeah, I don't remember the last time it was not crazy, to be honest. But you know, when you like what you do, it's what you want to do. Christmas just passed, and you know, Rob and I didn't have childcare. We both own our own businesses, so what that means is, you know, we get to hang out with our kids, but our businesses go on hold. And by the time New Year's passed and we had spent the last week with our kids, the two of us just looked at each other and were like, I want to go to work. I can't wait to go to work. And it wasn't, I can't wait to get away from my kids. It was just, I miss working. I like what I do. I want to keep doing it. So I think it might be the one thing I miss more on vacation than anything else.
well, that enthusiasm you have, it comes through in all your images. It comes through when you teach a class. It comes through with everybody that meets you. You do love what you do. And there's that old line about if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And that's what you walk the talk.
I try.
Well, talk about walking the talk. I mean, looking at your images online, your portfolio, and of course I see you everywhere. And so excited to have you on the show, Vanessa. Your passion absolutely comes through. And we like to kick it off with our favorite question, asking you about how you even stepped into the photography industry. How did you get started?
It's not a long story. You know, I could sum it up with my mom was a photographer and my grandmother was a journalist. She was actually one of the first women journalists in the Senate here in New Jersey. So it's in my blood. I always say my mom gave me the eye, but my father was a business owner and he taught me how to work for it. And in between, you know, starting to understand photography and running my own business, I took it in high school, and my photography teacher in high school did weddings on the weekends. So after I graduated and started going to school to be a Spanish teacher, believe it or not, I went back to my high school and I didn't ask for a job. I believe I was there just to cut some mats because I didn't like the mat cutter that was at my college, and I was taking some photography classes there. And I ended up working for him for, I want to say 5 or 6 years before I went ahead and started my own business, and eventually quit teaching Spanish because I really did not enjoy that. That was like working every day of my life. And that's it. Just kept moving and growing from there. And then through in the education side, after going to a few trade shows, and not in a bad way, well, kind of in a bad way, I'll just be honest. I would look at these photographers that were so good and I was so envious, and I just wanted to learn every little ounce, every little drop of what I could from them, but they didn't know how to teach a concept. So I have a bachelor's degree in education and I used to be a teacher. And I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe I could teach a little bit of photography on the side of what I do for weddings. And I did that. And then that grew. And now, right now, I'm at about a 50-50 split between income and time of, the weddings that I photograph and all the teaching that I do.
Well, there's nothing like working under someone for a number of years as far as gaining real world photography experience.
Oh, yeah. I always say I got to make all of my mistakes on his dime in his business.
It's interesting, and most people don't realize it, but 50% of the industry in the portrait social category, which is wedding and portraiture, are made up of part-time photographers. And there's always been a very high correlation going way, way back. I mean, going back 30, 40 years ago, between teachers and wedding photography, because the wedding industry used to be, it had some really strong boundaries starting in April and, finishing later on in the year. But it was always kind of, most weddings were taking place in the spring. Now they're all year long. But it was perfect for teachers because the summer would come along and a teacher's out of a job for the summer until the fall, and photography jumped in. Plus, it's a weekend event and they're teaching during the week. And it's just interesting when you said you had a teacher who was also a wedding photographer. Great experience. And speaking of teaching, I'd love to know, because you're doing, when you mentioned, it's about a 50-50 split now. What kind of trends are you seeing in what photographers seem to need the most when you're teaching all your classes? And I know, like I said, you've got one coming up at Imaging USA in another week or so.
Yeah, it's kind of nonstop, to be honest. I teach outside the photography community as well. So this is a photography podcast, although, with your title, it could be really, really anything. Business kind of is like math. It's the same in every language. It's the same in every industry. But so I speak outside of the photo industry as well. I speak to small business owners and teach them how to run a business. Social media is definitely a big part of what I teach outside as well.
Well, what trends are you seeing? Let's just hit photography for a second, but then I'd love to get into the common elements between a small business owner of any business, because photographers just don't realize sometimes that they're small business owners.
Right.
But they
really don't. They're just artists.
In terms of what seems to be missing in a lot of skill sets for photographers, any trends that you're seeing that, here's where a lot of people seem to need help?
The trends, I've certainly seen them over the past 20 years. The trend right now that I see that most needs, there's two sides of the fence, and this is going to be kind of controversial, I guess. I was about to say it most needs fixing, but that's debatable, is the difference between photography and Photoshop. And I see a lot of that now, whether it's professional photographers or hobbyists or Instagrammers or whatever it is. It's creating a lot of different issues. And I believe, digital art is absolutely art and photography, and then sometimes you meld the two. But what's happening with that trend of really adding a lot of digital art to photography is that, one, people are not, by people I mean brides for me, they're not understanding how difficult it is to Photoshop. So their expectations get a little bit skewed. They think, just Photoshop every single one of my 1,000 images that you took, make me skinnier, make me plastic looking, make me this, make my eyes bigger, make, whatever it is. And it's creating unrealistic expectations for professional photographers who have a client that comes in and, wants their photos from their wedding to be face-tuned. I also think that it's not healthy for everyone else who's seeing all of these images, because even professional photographers sometimes cannot tell the difference between photography and Photoshop. So then, whether it's I'm looking at somebody and how they lit something, but it's really not how they lit it, it's how they Photoshop it, and then I'm, disappointed in my work. Or it's a young girl looking at a completely Photoshopped older woman that wants to look like that, but it's unrealistic and she doesn't realize it. Instagram in the past week, and I don't know if this was a hoax or if it was real. I'm pretty sure it was real. But I saw that Instagram was starting to take down photos that were too manipulated in post so that it would not be a lie.
That's interesting.
Yes. So that was like a long-winded answer, but I think it's a pretty serious thing to consider, not only in photography and as a trend, and can we keep up with these expectations and things like that, but also in our culture as a complete mental health or reality health, I guess, issue.
Well, as a photographer, are you taking steps towards, I'd be curious to hear about the process of your client education, educating your client so that their expectations are realistic. I know this is kind of putting you on the spot, but are you able to name any steps that you take in order to onboard your clients correctly?
Oh, absolutely. The non-Photoshop thing is something that I say to them when they're consulting with me. You have that conversation about photography style or what they're looking for. And what I usually tell them is that, my work is exactly how you see it. That sky that you see right here, that was a sky on their wedding day. I'm not adding things that didn't happen to tell your story, because then your story won't be real anymore. And I'll even go as far to tell them, anything that we print on the wall or put in your album, I will retouch that complimentary. You just ask me and let me know what you want me to retouch. But to be honest, I only get about 1% of people that ever ask to have any photo retouched, because of the way that I photograph. It's meant to smooth out skin and to be very flattering to you. So most people don't even ask for any Photoshop at all.
That's fantastic. That's a very, very smart and sustainable way to do it.
Yeah. And that's most of what it is just setting those expectations from the beginning. Now, that's not going to be for everyone. I've certainly had people that are like, no, I want everything Photoshopped. I want to be skinnier. I want to be whatever it is. I'm like, that's great. Here's a photographer that will work wonderfully for you.
And, ethically and morally, it can be a fine line. I've worked for the magazine industry, and retouching models to look, to add 20 pounds here, remove 20 pounds there, and then presenting those images to the world. It is very easy as an everyday consumer to lose touch with reality, with what's real and what's not in images. So I love the way you handle that issue, because that is a very big issue.
Well, along in that same vein, I'm curious about actual products of what kinds of things are you seeing that are hot with clients right now? I mean, we've gone back and forth over the years over everything from canvas prints to multiple albums to printing on glass. I happen to love Bay Photo's Performance EXT metal prints. I've actually got one outside. What kind of products are consumers getting more excited about? Any trends you're seeing there?
I do have to say that's another expectation or guidance that I give them, because I want their priority to be the album, to tell the whole story. So I focus on that first when I'm doing my sales sessions, when I'm doing my album designs, is really making that the primary product. And with that, actually, and the way that I've been doing in-person sales, I've actually tripled the size of the album usually, or more, or quadrupled it, that comes with a package. So most of my collections have a 30-page album in it, and the average size album has been about 80, 90 pages this year and last. And my biggest album was 134-page 2-volume.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so that's been huge. And I mean, I'd like to brag and say it's all me, but I think it's a combination between how I'm selling it to them, making it easy, making it fun, and also them, the culture and that age of my typical client, understanding that digital photos are all well and good and they get them, but they never look through their phone pictures ever. And they're certainly not going to do it with their wedding pictures. And by the time their kids come around, there won't even be a USB to plug in that flash drive I gave them. So how to really pass down that legacy is a printed, tangible product. So that's what I want. So that's what's trending with me. The other interesting thing is most of my clients are North Jersey or Manhattan or Brooklyn, and they don't have wall space. So as much as I would like to sell them a 24 by 36 canvas or even a 16 by 24 glass, which I do sell a few of, most of them end up taking that in the package and like cutting it in half or giving it to their parents or something because they simply do not have wall space in the small areas that they live in.
Well, that's a true testament to really knowing your client and not putting them in a box, but really understanding what they need and how you can best serve them, for sure. And
I made the mistake of, trying to be like, no, but why don't you want a wall portrait? Why don't you want to? And then I realized I'm like, oh my gosh, like they really don't have a place to put it. So it would be a crazy burden to have this massive thing in a studio apartment in Manhattan.
Well, kind of going on that same trend, just to share with our listeners, Brian Caparici a few years ago did a blog post. And one of the things he does when he works a bridal fair is he'll hand the bride a floppy disk and say, hey, take these home and take a look at my images to see my work. And they'll look at him like he's from outer space. And then he makes the point about the importance of the album, because you don't know what's going to happen to those images. And like you said, they don't look at images on their phone very often. You don't want that lost. That album really is what I said in the beginning. It's that first family heirloom of a brand new family.
So true. That's hysterical. That is a great tactic. I'm going to
have
to
great. I thought it was great.
Find some floppy disks.
Yeah, I added to that, by the way. I took one of these sappy frames that says, I don't know, Friends Forever or Love or something, and I took out the picture of me and Sheila in it. I just had a jump drive
that's so
that
good.
I put under the glass. And I've actually given that to photographers. Anybody that wants it is welcome to it and can use it. But it also makes the point about the importance of your album and storytelling and an actual print, as opposed to stuff stashed away on DVDs and jump drives and whatever the future brings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Vanessa, I'm curious about the role of relationship building with your business, because it takes a heck of a lot of trust for a bride to trust you with her wedding day, to show up and know that you understand the background and history and the vibe between her and the groom. And so I'm curious, do you have any tips as far as relationship building with the bride and the family, or even with other vendors related to the whole wedding day?
That is exactly my marketing plan as of late, because relationship building is the only thing that is going to surpass any cultural change, any new social media thing that comes out, medium, or any change in the marketplace. Is just relationships, and they're really hard to maintain, whether it's with your client. I actually find the clients easier to maintain, and then maintaining them with all the different vendors. So that's something that I've been working on. With my clients, it's a little bit more systematic. So I make sure that I send out emails to them every month, 6 months before their wedding, just giving them tips and tricks. I send out gifts to them 3 times over the course of our relationship together, which is one of my favorite things to do. It's also nice to have them to have something tangible, so then they could post it on social media, and then it's kind of getting the best of both worlds and in the marketing side. And then my vendor relationships, that's something I'm working on really, really hard lately. I've been slacking off a little bit. It's very difficult to maintain 2 full-time businesses between the education and the weddings. I always find when I'm really succeeding in one, the other one is suffering a little bit. So the vendor relationships were what was suffering for me in 2019, and now I'm looking to better it in 2020. So with them, I put together an Excel spreadsheet of all the different vendors that I'm familiar with and know. I mailed them all out studio magazines that actually don't go to clients. They just go to the vendors. Basically asked 100 people out to coffee or lunch, and spending a lot of my time, going and fulfilling those lunch dates, which, there's one this week, there's one last week. Sometimes I stack them and I eat a lot of lunch that day. I drink a lot of coffee that day. That being said, I don't want to I'm not going to be the best vendor for everyone, but I've made it a point to search for the relationships that I really want to spend more time with. So this was almost like my overhaul of all the vendors that I really know and have worked with. And then I'll meet with all the ones that are kind enough to take me up and, respond to my offer. And then those are the relationships I'm going to work on. Those are the vendors that, I'll send albums to, or I'll send, brochure cards of their pictures or their product with my pictures and both our logos on it. So that's what I'm trying to do as far as the vendors go right now. Anyway, it always changes. Always got to do something new.
Well, it's such a great way to be able to build your business. I know Bob Davis and Dawn do something similar where they'll send images to a vendor, and it's just called With Our Blessing, where vendors just don't have an opportunity often to see the results. At least the owner of the company doesn't, and there's a crew there, whether it's the caterer or the decorator or the florist, and being able to get those images. It's a great way to be able to build a stronger business. I have a question for you that's going to step completely away from everything we've talked about. One of the things that you're known for, and you did a great guest post on SCU a few years back, what are some of the secrets that you share? They're not really secrets. What are some of the tips you'd give photographers when they've got to pose a large group and get it done quickly? And I don't want to go into the whole process, but it's almost a trademark for you. I'm trying to remember, was it a dozen groomsmen?
The one that I'm thinking of, my biggest one, I had 19 groomsmen.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
It was ridiculous. Thankfully, there weren't also 19 bridesmaids. There were, I think, 9 of them, though. And yes, so it is a trademark. It's something I teach. I call it speed posing. You can go to speedposing.com to see about how I do it for groups and families and individuals and couples. But as far as groups goes, yeah, I just have a system where it flows. So take a bridal party, for example. I put all of the women in. I'm going to take a picture of all the bridesmaids, and I put them all in, and I line them up according to height, and I photograph them. And then I walk along that line and photograph every one of their headshots while they're all standing there. So I'm the only one moving. That's the biggest key. Is it's always faster to move yourself than to move other people. So we do that, photograph them, and then I have everyone take a step away from the bride, and then I tell all the groomsmen, go stand next to the person that you walk down the aisle with or will walk down the aisle with, because the bride has already painstakingly matched everyone up according to height. So as long as I arrange the bridesmaids, who traditionally listen a little better than the groomsmen, I've arranged them first according to height. I just make them step out and fill them in with the groomsmen. Then I take all the pictures of all the groomsmen. I just have them moving together, and they're already perfectly posed for me according to height. So that's my method for quickly posing a bridal party. It doesn't matter how big. It works pretty much every time.
It's definitely a process that photographers need to practice, because you cannot take every bride has a horror story, and usually it's an urban myth. It probably didn't happen to them, but they heard from somebody who heard from somebody. And the usual line we used to hear was, well, I had a friend that missed her whole reception because it took so long to do the bridal party.
Yes.
And 99% of those stories aren't true, but way back when, somebody really did get burned, and that's one of those big fears.
100%.
Well, I've heard it's like herding cats at a wedding, where everybody kind of scatters, and it can be so hectic. And so I love the tips that you shared, Vanessa. It's just...
It's not herding cats. It's herding drunk cats.
Oh, even better. Wow. Yeah, this has been awesome. I can't help but ask one of our favorite questions as we wrap up this interview. And even though you've already given a ton of amazing tips for our listeners, do you have any advice that perhaps you didn't touch on, that you would give for photographers who are just starting out?
The best advice I can give, if you're just starting out, don't think that you are an island and you have to just start a business and get going. One of the biggest advantages that I had in my photography career was working for that other photographer for 5 years and making mistakes on his dime and his business. And that part of the process has been cut out in more recent years when it comes to building a photography career. a lot of photographers now are, okay, I want to be a photographer. Let me start my business and start taking pictures. So that's fine if you do that. But in the meantime, go assist for as many different photographers as you can for free if you have to. Just go so that you can stand there and watch somebody else do the job that you want to do. You'll like some things that they do, you won't like some other things, but they'll help you develop your style and you'll learn a ton from them. And as many different ones as you can, because we all have different styles. So it's not going to be the same assisting for me as it would be for Bob and Dawn Davis. It's going to be completely different. We have different styles. We get to the same happy result with a happy client with happy wedding photos, but how we get there is very different. And then shoot for, second shoot for as many different photographers as you can. Just gain all of that knowledge that you'll be able to apply to your own business and photography later.
Jerry Guionis made a comment in a workshop years ago that the way photographers come into the business is all wrong, that you get your camera and you're out there and you have to run your business and become an artist. And he said, truthfully, the way everybody should start is to second shoot and assist for 2 years, get to know the craft. And then once you had the craft down and understood every button and all the bells and whistles of your camera and the technology and exposure and composition, now you've got to the point where now you can pay attention and run a business. And you just hit it now. That experience that you got over those 5 years was invaluable. Plus, in your case now where it's 50-50 teaching versus shooting, that's fantastic with a degree in education. Now I understand a big part of the secret of why your classes are so good.
Thank you.
Hey, just before we wrap it up, all I want to do is ask one final question.
Okay.
Because I know you've got a lot going on. I know that I mentioned Imaging USA a couple times. Anything new coming up you can share with us that's exciting?
Yes. Well, today is Friday when everyone is listening to this. So you may or may not have heard that Canon just launched a 1DX Mark III on the 6th. And you can go to my YouTube. It's just youtube.com/Vanessa Joy and check out the video that I made about that camera. They let me borrow it. I was able to shoot a real job with it as well as a styled shoot and really get hands-on experience that I'm not sure anyone's really had. So it's a really fun video. And then the other exciting thing is I wrote a book and it is coming out in February. So it's on pre-order right now on Amazon, but by WPBI time, which I'll also be speaking at, it will be ready, printed, done. I can't wait to hold it myself. I think I'm more excited than anyone else.
Congratulations.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, just a little busy,
Yeah, just a few things going on.
And Vanessa, where can folks check out your work online?
You can find me at vanessajoy.com. I typically hang out on Instagram if you want to find a social media outlet to find me on, and I'm just at Vanessa Joy there.
Perfect. And Skip, as usual, where can folks find you online?
And as usual, it's always the same answer. Everything I write is at skipcohenuniversity.com. You'll also find me over on doing some things and posting for Platypod, as they'll find you too, Shamira, and on SCU. And I'm Skip Cohen on Twitter. I'm Skip Cohen on Facebook. And Shamira and I always remind everybody that we're always interested in your input and feedback and who you'd like us to have as a guest. So write to us. My email is skip@mei500.com. And Shamira, where do they go to find you?
Folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That's my first name, CHAMIRA, @photofocus.com. And as Skip mentioned, yes, send us your feedback, your questions, your ideas. We love getting all of that stuff because it absolutely drives how we move forward with this show. And with that said, Vanessa, thank you again. This went by too quickly, too fast. This was amazing.
My pleasure.
And you shared some great advice and great tips and content.
Good. Glad to hear it.
And we want to thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they want to improve their photography business and make 2020 better than ever. We look forward to having you with us next time on Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by Photo Focus and Skip Cohen University.